Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
The Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors protects the general public and plays a critical role in our state's economy. We'll visit with the longtime executive director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors, Michael McDuff, when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Before you hire someone to work on your home or business, protect yourself. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure he or she is licensed in Louisiana. That's lacontractor.org for a list of over 26,000 licensed contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Protect yourself from the headaches of dealing with a non-licensed contractor. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure the person or company who wants to work for you is licensed by the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Michael McDuff of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors is our guest. You know, buddy, one of the really great things about doing this television show, I get to visit with my friends and friends who are leaders in our state's economy and our business community. And it's always a pleasure to visit with you, man. How are you?
Thank you, Tim. Everything's great. And it's my pleasure to come back and visit with you. And it's always fun to look back and look forward where we came from and where we're going with what you do, what I do, and what our industry does.
You and I first met back in the early 90s when we both worked for Associated Builders and Contractors. And then since you've moved over to the licensing board, you guys have been a great supporter of our television and radio program, and I'm grateful for that. One of the things we always like to start with, Mike, is to remind our viewers about the background of the leaders that we have. Talk a little bit about your journey and your path that led you to being the executive director of the State Licensing Board for Contractors.
And, you know, Tim, it's been over 30 years, which that's aging you and I, that over 30 years ago as young men, you and I had the opportunity working with the leaders of the construction industry in Louisiana that we were able to be part of and to witness the key leaders of our industry in Louisiana, that where their needs were with the great need of the construction industry, that these individuals, whatever the needs were, they made it happen, and for the benefit of the customer and for the construction industry. That is something that you and I will never forget.
Yeah, and you were a leader at the Associated Builders and Contractors. I think left there and spent some time working with some industrial contractors or one particular industrial contractor, and then had the opportunity to go over to the State Licensing Board. And how long have you been there now?
It's been about 14 years with the State Licensing Board.
I was going to say 15, but I knew it had been some time. The State Licensing Board for Contractors plays a critical role in our state's economy, and it helps to regulate the construction industry. 99.9% of the construction companies that operate in our state do so with great integrity. But you guys are there to make sure that those 1/10 of 1% who might be unscrupulous that don't have the opportunity to get a foothold and to to perpetrate fraud on the public. Talk a little bit about the mission of the organization, Mike, and you know how you guys do it.
And again, you're right. The construction industry, the purpose of the State Licensing Board for Contractors is to protect the public, but also to maintain the integrity of the industry. That we have experienced those that do it right, and in Louisiana, the great majority, they do things right. The industry, we license and regulate all contractors in Louisiana, commercial, industrial, residential. The commercial and the industrial sector, they protect themselves very well. They know how to protect themselves and verify licensure, safety, all the key things that are needed in the industry. So our role in licensing is to make sure that we're helping promote the integrity of the industry. And by doing the licensure, it's to measure competency. And one of the things that we want to make sure that as a regulatory body, we are not overburdensome, that everything that we do in this day and time is to streamline the efficiencies to where the licensure process should not be a burden. And one of our biggest goals is for our contractors that work across the country, that our counterparts in other states with reciprocal agreements, that they do the same thing, that let's not put barriers and blocks for those contractors that are serving the customers. And simplification is one of the most important things that we do.
Well, I think that's what has marked your tenure at the licensing board, right? Is that you came from the construction industry.
Yes.
So you understand the business very, very well. And I think that if you look back on the things that you have accomplished with your team there, I think that simplification, I think that streamlining, I think that making sure that you promote and not obstruct really good contractors that are out there has been something that you have done very, very well. And I know that's something you and your team are proud of.
We are, and I appreciate that. And for the construction industry that asked and demanded for licensure and regulation, they want the level playing field, that's the goal. Let's make sure that everything that we do is fair and consistent towards licensure so that everyone knows what the rules are, whether it be in the commercial, the industrial sector, residential. And for those contractors that are in business for the right reasons, that's what it should be.
Now, you know, if you think about some of the natural disasters that have taken place in Louisiana, and of course all across the country, but specifically in our state where you have responsibility, you know, there are times where less reputable folks will come into this space thinking that they can take advantage of hurricane rebuilds or flood rebuilds. And those are the times when the licensing board really shines in protecting the public and watching for that fraud. What are some of the things you guys have seen over the last few years?
And Tim, that's true, that after any storm, hurricane, whatever it may be, the storm chasers, they're showing up. And for the consumers, that's where consumers have to be very, very careful to check references. When somebody shows up and knocks on your door and wants money up front, certainly that's the first alarm signal that you should not be paying cash up front. With a business card that shows no local business or anything like that. But for the consumers, the contractor fraud is a big threat, primarily in the residential sector. So we urge and encourage the consumers, whether it be the hurricane or the flood, be patient, use your due diligence, check references, and be patient enough to know we have a lot of great contractors that will service the needs of the consumers, but just be patient. Don't take money up front or don't give money up front and be taken advantage of.
And you guys have made it easy with your website for folks to go on and check references, check licensure. That's a good setup on who you are and what you do. I want to spend the rest of our time over the next couple of segments talking about the industry in general that you have been such a critical part of. We're visiting with Michael McDuff. He's the Executive Director of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. And you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell,
the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, the world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. We're formulating a better way for everyone, because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into.
Solar panels,
windmills,
reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint is a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today? Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Michael McDuff of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors is our guest. We ended the last segment talking about protecting the general public from fraud. One of the things that I know you have worked very hard on is the relationship with law enforcement that the Licensing Board has. Talk a little bit about that and how police departments, sheriff departments, and particularly DAs help you protect the public.
And Tim, the reality of contractor fraud, which is true not just in Louisiana but around the country, it's so important for our district attorneys and our local sheriffs and local law enforcement because they're the eyes and ears on what's going on in their parish. And so when these storm chasers show up, and they will go knock on the doors and beg for money, that for the contractor fraud issue, we work closely with the sheriffs and the DAs to the data and data sharing, that information that we have with our investigators around the state, so that they can enforce this, that we have a lot more parishes today than we did 10 years ago that are actively engaged in contractor fraud, which that message gets across to those that are out there taking advantage of our consumers, and particularly the truth that the elder abuse in the residential world, that's where contractor fraud is so prevalent, that is very important for your local law enforcement to help protect.
You guys as an agency can go and investigate, you can gather information, but quite frankly, if a crime has been committed, it is incumbent upon the sheriffs and the DAs at that point to get involved and prosecute that crime.
Correct,
right?
Because as a licensing board for contractors, we have no arrest powers. We are purely there on the licensure. And so the partnership with the local law enforcement, that's where we're doing very good to help protect the public there.
It's an interesting thing. Over the years, you and I have had discussions about this whole idea of licensure, right? And there are some who might say licensure is restrictive. But I think in most places, quite frankly, I think that the really reputable contractors accept it, and they know it's important and it's critical to protect against that 1% or 1/2 of 1% or 1/10 of 1% who might not want to do it the right way.
Absolutely,
right?
That's true.
Let's talk about the industry, because you and I sort of both grew up in it, right? One of the things that I have said, and I've heard you say over and over, is that Louisiana is a pretty unique place for a lot of reasons, but it's unique in the construction industry too. If you think about particularly commercial and industrial construction, there are a lot of big boys out there that are big national players on both sides, but there is enough homegrown commercial and industrial construction talent in this state that big projects really never have to look any farther than our own borders here. You think about the big boys, the Turners, the Brown and Roots, the performance contractors, the XLs, the ISCs, the triads, the MMRs. You think about all of that homegrown industrial, Lemoyne, MAP, it goes, Arkell, it goes on and on and on. Talk about that homegrown talent and how critically important it is that we have been able to cultivate those companies and therefore that employment right here in Louisiana.
And you know, Tim, as you and I talk about this, and we mention all of these professionals, in Louisiana we have a standard. We have such a higher standard for the construction industry that these contractors you've mentioned, they work all across the country. And on mega projects that you may have the assumption you have to have a large contractor from another state. That's not true. Louisiana has provided that resource, and from a professional level to the craft level, it is amazing what we have in Louisiana, and that's something we're awfully proud of. That as we talk about contractor fraud, I'm more proud of what we do have, doing it the right way for customers and consumers. You have a lot to be proud of in Louisiana.
If you think of the contractor lineage, if you think of the tree, right? We hear a lot about coaching trees and all that sort of thing, but if you think about Homer Nost and, and Bert Turner, and then you think of the folks that have come from that, Art Favre and Eddie Risponi and Jerry Risponi and Roland Toops and Stevie Toops and Andy Dupuy and Nelson Dupuy and Mike Polito and Lenny Lemoyne, and you just think about the leaders in this construction industry in Louisiana and what a difference those individuals have made, not just in their companies, but in our state's economy overall.
And again, these folks that at one time in life, they have worked with each other, for each other, and whether it be then or now, they are not working, they compete, but they compete at a very good level. But they work together on behalf of their industry. That is the amazing thing that you and I have been able to be part of, that these major competitors, that they identify where they need to take their industry to be better on their benefit and for the clientele.
You know, that was one of the amazing things for me, Michael. When I went to work with you and for you, quite frankly, at Associated Builders and Contractors back in the early 90s, one of the things you told me is, here's one of the things you're going to enjoy watching. These guys will compete against one another fiercely outside of this building. But when they walk in this boardroom, they are a team fighting for the industry. Absolutely. And man, have they done a great job at that. You think about the Lane Grigsbys of the world, the Milton Gronyards of the world at Cajun, and just all of these leaders that you and I have had the great pleasure to watch and learn from. It's been a great ride.
And if you ask the industry leaders from Exxon, from Dow, from BASF, they'll tell you the same thing, because they have been the recipient of that level, that standard of excellence. So it's been a great view from our standpoint.
It really has. Let's take a break. We come back. I want to get into supply chain. I want to get into training. I want to get into the difficulties, some of the difficulties that the industry is seeing as we think about today's economy. We're visiting with Michael McDuff of the State Licensing Board for Contractors. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Michael McDuff of the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors is my guest. Tough economic times in a lot of ways right now,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, there's this good news, bad news that we're dealing with, particularly in the construction industry, that we've got coming out of this pandemic. We've got all these pent-up industrial and commercial projects that are ready to go, huge demand, but at the same time, we face these headwinds with escalation in prices, with supply chain issues that make it difficult to get materials that we need. We look at the recession, that's possible, that's sort of looming out there. So there's a good news, bad news kind of mix going on in the industry right now. Talk about your perspective on all of that.
And again, Tim, in our industry, what happened during this legislative session with all of the great news on infrastructure, from the federal money coming to Louisiana, and economically, in the pipeline, there's so much work out there, and the industry faces the same challenge of all professions. It's a labor shortage, it's the deliverable of materials, it's the cost, and it's a challenge that I do know that the construction industry has been through this cycle before at different levels, but the construction industry will come through this and will provide great response to this, but it will be a challenge.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of this sort of perfect storm, right? As you mentioned, we've seen labor shortages before. We've seen supply chain issues before. We've seen material shortages before. We've seen price escalation before. But it seems like all of that hitting the industry at one time. But as we talked about in the last segment, when you think about the skill and the capability and the experience and the knowledge of Louisiana's particularly industrial and commercial construction base, I know that we'll get through it. You mentioned infrastructure, right? It's something that this state has begun to pay attention to in a way maybe that we haven't in the past. Our state's infrastructure is crumbling in a lot of ways. We have not invested in infrastructure in our state like we needed to. Now, this governor and this legislature moving to change that and work. Our mutual friend, Dr. Sean Wilson, head of Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, working 15 hours a day to try to make this work. And we're seeing some more investment, but we are so far behind. But we know that infrastructure work creates jobs, it strengthens the economy, it strengthens economic development. It is critically important. Talk about that.
And again, we've waited way too long, and Sean Wilson is our director of DOT. He has tried to push this forward. Now that the funding is available, we're starting to move forward, but we can't let the political world stop this and let it move forward, and let the industry do what we can do, which is to get this done. And even though we have challenges, the construction industry can meet the needs for the backlog, the huge backlog that has been facing our state on infrastructure needs.
If we can fund it and we can turn on and turn loose the innovation of Louisiana's contractors, I know we can make it happen. One of the things, and one of the organizations that I know is intimately involved in this infrastructure development in our state, and this money that's coming from the federal government through some of these packages that have been passed, is Associated General Contractors.
Correct.
You and I both work for Associated Builders and Contractors, but our mutual friend and longtime director of Louisiana AGC, Ken Nakan, very heavily involved because he's got a lot of these heavy highway contractors that are part of his association. I know you guys work closely with Ken and AGC as well.
And again, Ken Nakan and AGC, they have been trying to help the state of Louisiana move forward on these projects. And the highways and roads contractors, they're waiting to deliver the need on this. And so it's exciting to see that maybe in the future we will see a better road system in Louisiana. We know it's way past due.
And we've got to be willing to invest in it. One of the things that has marked your tenure at the licensing board as well is the engagement in workforce development that you guys have done. You've taken excess funds from time to time and invested them in training Louisiana's construction craft workforce. A very close relationship with organizations like NCCER, the National Center for Construction Education and Research, ABC and its 2 training centers, actually 3 training centers in Louisiana, and the Louisiana Community and Technical College. Your perspective on workforce development in the construction industry?
And again, those teams that you've mentioned, NCCR, the Community Technical College System, those are great partnerships that are serving the industry and the needs of the construction industry. Through the Licensing Board for Contractors, I'm proud that we raise a lot of money annually through voluntary contributions that go to higher education, those colleges that have construction management programs, that we are able on an annual basis to give back to the industry because we're the recipient. The construction industry is the recipient of those students that come through the construction management program.
You and I have said it for years and years and years. It is that construction craft workforce. It is that construction craft leadership. It is those folks who go through those construction management programs and those other educational programs that exist in Louisiana. They're really where the rubber meets the road in our industry, and it's critically important. We got about 40 seconds left here. Your message to Louisiana citizens about what you do, and you mentioned it in the first segment, but the critical importance of utilizing licensed contractors.
And again, for the mission of the Licensing Board for Contractors, it's your money. Whether you're an owner or a consumer, it's your money. Be careful, do your due diligence, check references. Go to our website, lacontractor.org. You can verify the licensure of a contractor. You can obtain information about the licensing process and the streamlining that is there. It's easy, but from both sides, protect yourself.
Listen, it's always my great pleasure to have you on the show. I am grateful for all of the years of support that we've gotten from you and from the Contractors Licensing Board. Keep up the good work, brother. It's important.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.